Miko lived in a small room on the third floor of an old apartment building in Suginami, Tokyo. The building was worn down by time. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and the hallway lights flickered with a soft buzzing sound. Her room was simple. A low bed, a small table, a weak yellow lamp, and a curtain that never fully closed. Every morning, cold air slipped inside, carrying the smell of wet concrete and distant soy sauce from nearly food stalls. She woke up before sunrise every day. She made cheap green tea, tied her hair back, and stepped outside. The streets were quiet at that hour. Traffic lights changed color over empty roads. Cats searched through trash bags, and the first delivery trucks started their routes. Miko walked fast, head down, holding her bag close. Her workplace was a tiny food shop hidden in a narrow alley. A wooden sign hung above the door, and a small bell rang whenever someone entered. Inside, the shop was warm and full of steam from boiling pots. The air smelt of miso, soy, and fried tofu. Nico turned on the lights, cleaned the counters, boiled water, and chopped vegetables. Her routine was simple and repetitive, but it gave her comfort. Until the day he arrived. She first saw him on a rainy afternoon. The door opened slowly, and strangely, the bell didn't ring. He was tall and thin, wearing a long coat that looked wet even though the rain outside was light. His hair stuck to his forehead, and his eyes were unsettling. They didn't blink often. They stayed fixed on her, unbroken, like he was studying her. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He didn't point at the menu. He simply raised his hand and pointed at a bowl of soup. He sat in the corner, completely still. He didn't eat right away. He watched her. Every movement she made, every step she took, he followed with his eyes. Day after day, he returned. Each time, he came a little earlier. Each time, he sat a little closer to the counter. Each time, his eyes stayed on her a little longer. And then, his behavior became disturbing. Sometimes, when Mika turned her back for just a moment, she found him standing in a different part of the shop, even though she never heard him move. It was as if he glided silently across the floor. Other times, when she placed something on the counter, a knife, a bowl, a cup, he would slowly touch the exact spot where her hand had been. His fingers traced the surface, as if he wanted to feel her presence through the object. He had a habit that made her skin crawl. He tilted his hand very slowly whenever she looked at him. Not fast, not natural. A slow, unnatural tilt, like a puppet whose strings were pulled too gently. And he never blinked when she spoke. His eyes stayed wide, unbroken, fixed on her face. One afternoon, she felt warm breath on her neck. She turned and saw him standing right behind her. Too close, close enough that she could smell the dampness of his coat. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He only leaned forward slightly, as if listening to her breathing. When she closed the shop at night, she often saw him standing outside the alley, not moving, not hiding, just watching her. The rain fell on him, but he never lifted his hands to cover himself. Soon, Miko started seeing him not only at work, but near her home. At first, he stood across the street from her apartment building, always in the same spot, always staring at her door. Then he began to come closer. One night, she saw him inside the building's entrance. The old glass door didn't close properly, so Wanyan could push it open. Sometimes, when she climbed the stairs, she heard sleepers dragging behind her. Slow, soft, dragging sounds. When she reached the third floor, she turned and saw him standing on the landing, on her floor, right outside her door. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Miko slipped past him, unlocked her door with shaking hands, and closed it quickly. That night, she heard something she would never forget from the empty apartment next to hers. That apartment had been vacant for months. No tenant, no furniture, no lights. But she heard footsteps inside. Slow, dragging footsteps. She heard something brushing against the wall. She heard a soft thump, like someone leaning their weight against the shared wall. And then she heard breathing. Not her breathing. A slow, deep breath coming from the empty apartment, as if someone was standing right behind the wall, as if he was inside, as if he was listening. She pressed her hand over her mouth. The breathing continued, then stopped suddenly, like someone holding their breath, waiting. One evening, Miko returned home and saw the hallway light flickering. The air smelled like wet clothes, the same smell his coat always had. She climbed the stairs slowly, listening. When she reached her floor, she froze. His coat was hanging on the railing. Just the coat, web, dripping, placed neatly, as if waiting for her. She heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow, shabby. She panicked. She pressed herself against the cold concrete, trying not to breathe. The footsteps reached her floor. She saw his shadow first. He stopped right in front of her apartment door. He stood there for a long time, facing the door, not moving. Then he lifted his hand and touched the doorknob. Very slowly, turning it just a little, testing it. Miko held her breath so tightly, her chest hurt. He didn't open the door. He didn't knock. He just stood there, touching the doorknob, as if imagining what it would feel like to enter. After a long moment, he lowered his hand and walked away. His shadow disappeared down the stairs. His footsteps faded. Miku stayed hidden for 10 minutes before she dared to move. Mika was terrified to go to work, but she had no choice. She needed the money. She needed the routine. She needed something normal. But he was changing. He no longer sat in the corner. He sat at the counter, directly in front of her, close enough that she could see every detail of his face, close enough that she could hear his slow breathing. He came before opening hours. She would arrive to unlock the door, and he would already be there, standing silently in the alley. When she opened the door, he walked in without waiting for her to invite him. He stood behind her while she walked. She could feel his presence without turning around. His breath touched her neck. His shadow covered her hands as she chopped vegetables. Sometimes he leaned forward, tilting his head, watching her fingers move with unnatural focus. At night, he waited outside her building. Sometimes he stood across the street. Sometimes he stood right at the entrance. And sometimes he was already inside. One night, she heard the doorknob of her apartment turn. slowly, carefully, as if someone was testing it. As if someone wanted to know if she had locked it. She held her breath. The doorknob stopped moving. Then she heard footsteps walking away. Slow, calm, patient. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew he would come back. Miko didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor, with her back against the wall, listening to every sound, every creak, every step, every breath. In the morning, she went to work. He was already there, standing in front of the shop door, his coat wet, his eyes empty. He didn't enter. He didn't speak. He only watched her. She knew then that she couldn't stay. That night, she returned to her apartment only long enough to grab a few things. Her work apron, 2 changes of clothes, a bottle of water, and a handful of coins. She had no money, no plan, only fear. She looked out of the window. The street was empty. But emptiness meant nothing now. She turned off the lights, opened the door slowly, checked the hallway. No one. She walked down the stairs without making a sound, stepped outside, started walking fast, then faster. Then she ran. She didn't look back. She didn't want to know if he saw her. She didn't want to know if he followed. She didn't want to know if he was standing somewhere in the dark, watching her leave. Miko left the city that night, with no money, no home, nothing at all. Only the hope that the man with the wet coat didn't notice her escape. Only the hope that he wasn't behind her. Only the hope that she could disappear before he found her again.